Please don't fire me, Elena whispered, her voice cracking as tears threatened to spill from her amber eyes. I need this job more than you know. She stood trembling in the dimly lit office of Salvatore's, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in Manhattan, as Marcus Romano, the tyrannical general manager, loomed over her with unconcealed contempt. You think I care about your problems? Marcus sneered, his manicured fingers tapping impatiently against the polished mahogany desk. You embarrassed me in front of Senator Mitchell. Do you have any idea how much business he brings to this restaurant? If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Elena's gaze dropped to the carpet, her slender shoulders hunched beneath the crisp white uniform shirt that still bore the faint red stain from the wine incident. It wasn't her fault the senator had grabbed at her wrist as she poured, causing the Barolo to splash across the pristine tablecloth. But Marcus didn't care about facts, only appearances and profit margins. I'm sorry, she murmured, though the apology tasted bitter. In the 6 months she'd worked at Salvatore's, Elena had endured Marcus's verbal abuse, his wandering eyes, and his constant threats. But she couldn't lose this job, not with her mother's medical bills piling up, and the rent on their small Queens apartment already 2 weeks overdue. Sorry doesn't keep the lights on, Marcus barked, circling his desk to stand uncomfortably close. Elena could smell the expensive cologne masking the whiskey on his breath. I've given you too many chances already. You're done here. Elena felt the floor shift beneath her feet. Panic rose in her throat, choking her. Please, she said, hating how weak she sounded. I'll work double shifts. There's one way you could make it up to me. Marcus's voice dropped an octave as his gaze raked over her. His fingers reached out to tuck a strand of dark hair behind her ear, lingering against her skin. Elena recoiled instinctively, and his expression hardened. Or not. Your choice. Either way, turn in your uniform before you leave. A single tear escaped, trailing down her cheek. I have bills to pay. My mother's treatment's not my problem. Marcus turned back to his desk, dismissing her. You should have thought about that before you spilled a $400 bottle of wine on one of our most important clients. The office door swung open without warning. Elena didn't need to turn around to know who stood in the doorway. She felt his presence like a physical force, the sudden tension crackling in the air, the way Marcus's face drained of color. Interesting. The voice was deep, controlled, with the faintest hint of an Italian accent. I was wondering where my wife had disappeared to. Elena closed her eyes briefly, equal parts relief and dread flooding her system. Dante, Salvatore, owner of the restaurant chain, heir to one of New York's most powerful crime families, and her husband of exactly 3 months and 2 days, stood in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. His obsidian eyes took in the scene before him. Elena's tear-streaked face, Marcus's sudden pallor, the palpable tension between them. Dante, Marcus stammered, straightening his tie with trembling fingers. I didn't know you were coming in today. Evidently. Dante stepped into the room, his movements fluid and controlled. Despite his tailored suit and refined demeanor, there was something innately predatory in his bearing, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked beneath his civilized veneer. He hadn't risen to control half of Manhattan's underworld by being merciful to those who crossed him. Elena had never wanted this marriage. It had been arranged to settle her father's gambling debts to the Salvatore family, a business transaction dressed up as a wedding. Her father had disappeared the day after signing the contract, leaving Elena to honor the agreement or face consequences she couldn't afford to imagine. For 3 months, she'd lived in Dante's penthouse, slept in a separate bedroom, and maintained the public facade of being Mrs. Salvatore while working at his restaurant under her maiden name. What they hadn't planned on was the strange, reluctant respect that had developed between them. Dante had never forced himself on her, never treated her like property, though she was painfully aware that's precisely what she was. Elena. Dante's gaze shifted to her, his expression unreadable. Wait for me outside. It wasn't a request. Elena hesitated, caught between fear for Marcus despite everything and the ingrained habit of obedience to her husband. Dante noticed her hesitation. Now, Elena. His tone softened marginally, but the command remained. She moved toward the door, casting one backward glance at Marcus, whose face had taken on the sickly pallor of a man who suddenly realized he'd been playing with fire. In the hallway, Elena leaned against the wall, her heart hammering in her chest. The door closed with a soft click that somehow sounded more ominous than a slam would have. The murmur of voices from within was too low to distinguish words, but she didn't need to hear them to know what was happening. Dante was not a man who tolerated disrespect, especially not toward his possessions. And make no mistake, that's what she was. A possession acquired to settle a debt, a convenient public wife to deflect attention from his other activities, a prop in the carefully constructed facade of legitimacy that the Salvatore family maintained. Elena slid down the wall until she was sitting on the hallway floor, her waitress uniform bunched around her thighs. She should feel relieved that Dante had intervened. Instead, she felt hollow. Another decision made for her, another reminder that her life wasn't her own. 5 minutes passed. 10. The restaurant beyond the hallway continued its elegant choreography of fine dining, crystal glasses clinking, murmured conversations, the occasional polite laugh. This world of wealth and power had never been hers, even after she'd taken Dante's name. The office door opened. Dante emerged alone, straightening his cufflinks, a habitual gesture she'd come to recognize when he was containing his anger. There was no blood on his knuckles, no visible sign of violence, but the cold fury in his eyes told her everything. "Come," he said simply, extending his hand to help her up. Elena took it, feeling the familiar calluses on his palm incongruous with his expensive suit and cultivated image, a reminder of his true nature. He didn't release her hand as he led her through the kitchen's back exit to the private elevator that connected the restaurant to the executive offices above. "What happened to Marcus?" she finally asked when the elevator doors closed. Dante's jaw tightened. "He's reconsidering his career options. Did you hurt him?" Dante's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "No, Elena. Contrary to what you might think, I don't solve every problem with violence." The elevator opened directly into his office suite, a vast space of marble, leather, and glass with panoramic views of the Manhattan skyline. Elena had been here only twice before, and both times had felt like a visitor in a museum allowed to look but not to touch. "Sit," Dante gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Elena perched on the edge, hands folded in her lap, watching as Dante removed his suit jacket and draped it precisely over the back of his chair. Even this simple action carried an air of controlled power. At 35, Dante Salvatore was in his prime, intelligent, dangerous, and disturbingly handsome, with raven black hair threaded with silver at the temples and eyes that missed nothing. "How long has Marcus been harassing you?" he asked without preamble. Elena's head snapped up. "He wasn't. Don't lie to me." Dante's voice remained level, but something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "I've had reports. I wanted to hear it from you before I acted." "Reports?" Of course. Elena should have known that working in Dante's restaurant meant being watched. "Since I started," she admitted quietly, "but it wasn't serious until recently." "Define serious." Elena shifted uncomfortably. "Comments. Looks. He made it clear that certain favors would be rewarded with better shifts. And today? He was firing me because I spilled wine on Senator Mitchell's table. The senator grabbed my wrist as I was pouring. She swallowed. Marcus suggested there was a way I could keep my job. Dante went very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence in nature. "I see. Why do you care?" The question slipped out before Elena could stop it. "Our arrangement doesn't include that. Their marriage was a business. Transaction protection for her mother, the wiping of her father's debts, and a respectable wife for public appearances in exchange for her freedom. They had separate bedrooms in his penthouse. He had never touched her beyond the chaste kiss at their wedding and the occasional guiding hand at public events. "You're my wife." Dante's response was simple, as if that explained everything. On paper. In every way that matters to the outside world, he leaned forward. "And in this family, we protect what's ours." There it was again, the ownership. The reminder of her status. "I didn't ask for your protection, yet you have it, unconditionally." Dante studied her, his dark eyes unreadable. "Why didn't you tell me about Marcus?" Elena looked away. "It wasn't your problem to solve. Everything that happens in my businesses is my problem. Everyone who works for me is my responsibility." He paused. "Especially you. I'm not some damsel who needs saving, Dante." "No," he agreed, surprising her. "You're a woman who's been fighting her own battles for too long. There's no weakness in accepting help, Elena." The gentleness in his tone caught her off guard. In their 3 months of marriage, this was perhaps the most real conversation they'd had. Usually, they exchanged polite, distant pleasantries at breakfast before going their separate ways. Dante to his various businesses, legitimate and otherwise, Elena to her shifts at Salvatore's, or to visit her mother in the private medical facility where Dante had arranged for her care. "I need to get back to work," she said finally. "You don't work on the floor anymore." Dante's tone made it clear this wasn't up for discussion. "You'll be managing the new Salvatore's opening in Tribeca next month." Elena stared at him. "I don't have any management experience." "You have a business degree you never got to use because of your father's debts," Dante countered. "I've seen your resume, Elena. I know what you're capable of." Of course, he had investigated her thoroughly before their arrangement. Still, it unsettled her to realize how much he knew about the dreams she'd abandoned to keep her family afloat. "Why would you do this?" she asked. Dante considered her for a long moment. "Perhaps I'm tired of watching you waste your potential serving overpriced wine to politicians. Or perhaps you want to keep me where you can control me more easily." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. That too. At least he was honest about it. Elena stood, smoothing down her uniform. "I should go change. Your things have been moved to my private suite upstairs. You can shower and change there." Dante picked up his phone. "I have meetings for the next 2 hours. After that, we'll discuss your new position." Elena nodded, recognizing the dismissal. As she turned to leave, Dante's voice stopped her. "Elena." She looked back to find his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. "No one will ever threaten your job or your safety again. I give you my word." Coming from anyone else, it might have been a simple reassurance. From Dante Salvatore, it was a vow written in blood figuratively and perhaps literally. In the private suite above the restaurant, Elena stood under the shower's scalding spray, trying to wash away the memory of Marcus's hands, his threats, his leering gaze. The bathroom was larger than her childhood bedroom, all marble and gold fixtures, the glass shower enclosure, offering a vertiginous view of Central Park 30 stories below. This was Dante's world, opulent, powerful, untouchable. How had she ended up here? The daughter of an accountant turned gambling addict and a mother who taught piano until multiple sclerosis had stolen her mobility. 3 months ago, she'd been juggling 3 jobs and drowning in her father's debts. Then Dante's men had found her, delivering an offer she couldn't refuse, marriage in exchange for her father's life and her mother's care. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Elena wrapped herself in one of the plush towels and padded into the bedroom, where she found clothes laid out on the bed, not her usual simple attire, but designer pieces with tags still attached. A cream silk blouse, tailored black pants, and a red blazer that probably cost more than a month's rent at her old apartment. On the dresser sat a velvet box containing a diamond pendant and matching earrings. The message was clear. If she was going to be a manager at Salvatore's, she needed to look the part. Elena dressed slowly, the expensive fabrics foreign against her skin. The woman who stared back at her from the mirror looked like a stranger, polished, elegant, belonging in Dante's world in a way Elena herself never had. Her phone buzzed with a text from the nurse who cared for her mother. "Everything good. Today. She asked about you." Elena closed her eyes, grateful for this one mercy in her complicated life. Whatever else happened, her mother was receiving the best care possible. For that alone, she would honor her bargain with Dante. She was applying minimal makeup when a knock at the door announced Dante's arrival. He entered without waiting for her response, his gaze sweeping over her transformed appearance with evident approval. "Better," he said simply. "The managers at Salvatore's project, confidence and competence. Is that all that matters? Appearances?" Elena challenged, turning to face him. "In our world, yes." Dante moved to the bar cart in the corner, pouring 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal tumbler. "People respect what they see. The substance comes later. Like our marriage?" His hand stilled momentarily. "Our marriage serves its purpose." "And what purpose is that exactly? Beyond settling my father's debts?" Dante took a measured sip before answering. "Protection. Legitimacy. Convenience." "Romantic," Elena said dryly. Something like amusement flickered in his dark eyes. "I never promised you romance, Elena." No, he hadn't. The contract had been explicit about what their arrangement entailed: a public marriage, separate private lives, her mother's care, and the erasure of her father's gambling debts. Nowhere had it mentioned feelings, desire, or the strange tension that sometimes crackled between them when their gazes held too long. "I've had the restaurant's financial records sent to your tablet," Dante continued. "All business now. You should familiarize yourself with them before meeting the Tribeca team tomorrow." Elena blinked. "That's fast. I don't waste time once decisions are made." He finished his drink. "You'll work directly with me on the opening. Consider it a crash course in restaurant management." "Why me?" The question that had been burning inside her finally escaped. "You have dozens of experienced managers. Why? Put your wife, your arrangement, in charge of your new flagship?" Dante set down his glass, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Because despite having every reason to break, you haven't. Because you work harder than anyone in that restaurant. Because I've watched you memorize wine pairings and customer preferences and staff schedules without being asked." He stepped closer. "And because I'm curious to see what you'll do with actual power instead of just serving those who have it." Elena swallowed hard, caught off guard by his unexpected faith in her abilities. "I don't know if I can do this." "You can." The certainty in his voice was disarming. "And you will." Before she could respond, his phone rang. Dante checked the screen and frowned. "I need to take this. The car will be ready in 20 minutes to take you home. We'll continue this discussion over dinner." He answered the call as he left, his voice shifting seamlessly into rapid Italian that Elena couldn't follow. The door closed behind him, leaving her alone with her reflection and the weight of her new reality. 20 minutes later, Elena sat in the back of Dante's sleek black Bentley as it glided through Manhattan traffic. The driver, a stone-faced man named Bruno who had worked for the Salvatore family for decades, maintained a respectful silence. Elena was grateful for it. Her mind was too full of the day's events to manage small talk. From nearly losing her job to becoming a restaurant manager, from being at Marcus's mercy to being under Dante's protection, the whirlash left her dizzy. And beneath it all ran a current of uncomfortable awareness. Today was the first time she'd glimpsed behind Dante's carefully maintained facade. The first time she'd seen something beyond the cold, calculating businessman who had purchased her life as casually as he might acquire a new property. The car pulled up to their building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in the heart of Manhattan. The doorman rushed to open her door, greeting her with a deference that still felt unearned. "Good evening, Mrs. Salvatore." Mrs. Salvatore, a name she wore like borrowed clothing, never quite fitting right. In the private elevator that whisked her to the penthouse, Elena leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. What was she doing? Playing house with one of New York's most dangerous men, pretending to be something she wasn't: a dutiful wife, now a business manager. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse foyer, a minimalist space of white marble and indirect lighting. Elena stepped out, slipping off her shoes out of habit, a small act of rebellion against the opulence surrounding her. Mrs. Salvatore, Sophia, the housekeeper, appeared from the kitchen. "Mr. Salvatore called. He asks that you be ready for dinner at 8. He's bringing a guest." Elena checked her watch, barely 6. "Thank you, Sophia. I'll be ready." In her bedroom, her space in this shared prison of luxury, Elena changed into a simple black dress that had been another of Dante's silent gifts. The man communicated more through his American Express than his words. As she fastened the diamond pendant around her neck, Elena caught her reflection again. The woman staring back looked confident, powerful, worthy of the Salvatore name. It was the best disguise she'd ever worn. By 8, Elena had reviewed the restaurant financials on the tablet Dante had sent. She was surprised to discover she understood more than expected. Her business degree hadn't been completely wasted during the years of waiting tables and bartending. The Tribeca location represented a significant investment, with projections that seemed aggressively optimistic. If she was really going to manage it, she needed to understand every aspect of the operation. The elevator announced Dante's arrival with a soft ping. Elena moved to the living room, where Sophia had arranged drinks on the marble-topped bar. Dante entered with another man, older, distinguished, with silver hair and a military bearing. The man's eyes widened fractionally at the sight of her. "Elena." Dante crossed to her, placing a possessive hand at the small of her back and brushing his lips against her cheek, a performance for their guest. "This is Judge William Harrington." "Judge, my wife, Elena." Understanding dawned immediately. Judge Harrington sat on the federal bench and had presided over cases involving Salvatore family interests in the past. This wasn't a social dinner. It was business disguised as hospitality. "A pleasure to finally meet you, Mrs. Salvatore," the judge said, taking her offered hand. "Dante has been keeping you all to himself. Please, call me Elena," she replied, falling into the role of gracious hostess with practiced ease. "What can I offer you to drink?" As she mixed the judge's requested Manhattan, Elena caught Dante watching her with an enigmatic expression. He'd seen her review the financials, and now he was observing how she handled his business associate testing her, evaluating her fitness for the role he'd assigned. Two could play that game. Elena handed the judge his drink with a warm smile, then prepared Dante's usual scotch without being asked. "I understand congratulations are in order, Judge," she said. "Sophia mentioned your daughter's engagement while she was setting up." The judge's face softened. "Thank you. Sarah's wedding is set for spring. We're thrilled about it, though the planning is driving my wife to distraction. Salvatore's would be honored to host any of the wedding events," Elena offered smoothly. "Perhaps the rehearsal dinner? I'm overseeing the opening of our new Tribeca location, which has a beautiful private space for special occasions." Dante's eyebrow rose fractionally, the only indication of his surprise at her initiative. The judge, however, beamed. "That's a wonderful idea. My wife has been searching for the perfect venue." He turned to Dante. "You didn't mention Elena was involved in the restaurant business." "My wife has many talents," Dante replied, his hand returning to the small of her back. "I've recently convinced her to take a more active role in our legitimate enterprises." The emphasis on legitimate was subtle, but Elena caught it. So did the judge, whose expression flickered momentarily before he raised his glass. "To new ventures, then." Dinner progressed smoothly, with Elena navigating the conversation away from anything too revealing about her past and toward the judge's favorite subjects: his family, his golf game, and his opinions on the city's changing landscape. Throughout, she felt Dante's gaze on her watchful, assessing, and tinged with something that might have been respect. When Sophia served coffee in the living room after the meal, the conversation inevitably turned to business. "I've reviewed the matter we discussed," the judge said, his tone noticeably cooler. "While I sympathize with your position, Dante, there are limits to what I can do without compromising my office." Dante nodded, unsurprised. "I understand your concerns, William. All I ask is fair consideration when the case comes before you." "The evidence is compelling," the judge warned. "The FBI has been building this case for years. Evidence can be interpreted many ways," Dante replied smoothly. "All I want is a judge who will see beyond the prosecution's narrative." Elena maintained her pleasant expression while her mind raced. They were discussing a case against the Salvatore family, or perhaps Dante specifically. The FBI was involved, and Dante was asking for the judge's favoritism, if not outright corruption. "Well," the judge set down his coffee cup, "I should get home to Margaret. She worries when I'm out late these days." "Of course." Dante stood. "Bruno will drive you." As the two men shook hands, Elena saw the judge slip something into Dante's palm, a small flash of white, the paper. Dante pocketed it without looking, his expression giving nothing away. After seeing the judge to the elevator, Dante returned to find Elena clearing the coffee cups. "Leave that," he said. "Sophia will take care of it in the morning." "I don't mind," Elena replied, needing the simple, normal task to ground her after the surreal evening. Dante watched her for a moment, then loosened his tie. "You impressed him. That was the goal, wasn't it?" She kept her voice neutral. "To present the perfect Salvatore wife?" "You did more than that." He moved to the bar, pouring another scotch. "The rehearsal dinner at Tribeca was a nice touch. It gives us leverage." "I wasn't thinking of leverage," Elena said honestly. "I was trying to make conversation." Dante's lips curved slightly. "And that's why it worked. The judge believes you're genuine." "I am genuine." Elena set down the cups with more force than intended. "Just because I'm in an arranged marriage doesn't mean I'm incapable of authentic human interaction." "That's not what I meant." Dante sighed, a rare show of fatigue. "You don't know how unusual you are in our world, Elena. Most people want something from me. You never have." "I wanted my mother's care and my father's debts cleared," she reminded him. "No, your father wanted that. You were just the payment method." His voice hardened. "Another thing he took from you." Elena stared at him, startled by the anger in his tone. "You almost sound like you care." "Perhaps I do." Dante swirled the amber liquid in his glass, not meeting her eyes. More than I should. The admission hung in the air between them, unexpected and dangerous. Elena had built careful walls around her heart, protecting herself from the reality of her marriage. Dante's words threatened to crack that defense. "What was on the paper the judge gave you?" she asked, changing the subject. Dante's expression closed immediately. "Nothing that concerns you. If it involves the FBI investigating your family, it concerns me," Elena countered. "I'm your wife, remember? For better or worse." "This falls under worse," Dante said flatly. "And we both know our arrangement doesn't extend to my business activities. Yet you expect me to charm federal judges at dinner," she pointed out. "Where exactly is the line, Dante?" He set down his glass with deliberate care. "The line is where I say it is." "Of course." Elena's voice cooled. "How could I forget? I'm just another acquisition." "You've never been just anything, Elena." Dante moved toward her, close enough that she could smell his cologne and the faint trace of scotch on his breath. "From the moment I saw your file, I knew you were different." "My file," she repeated bitterly. "My entire life reduced to paperwork for you to review before purchasing me. Would you prefer I'd let the sharks take your father? Let your mother lose her care?" His voice remained level, but his eyes flashed with rare emotion. "There were other options for settling his debt, Elena. None of them would have left you unscathed." A chill ran down her spine at the implication. "So I should be grateful?" "No," Dante surprised her by saying. "You should be angry at your father for putting you in that position. At a world where men like me have the power to determine your fate." His hand rose, hesitating a fraction before his fingers brushed her cheek. "But never think I see you as just an acquisition." Elena couldn't breathe, caught in the intensity of his gaze and the unexpected gentleness of his touch. For 3 months, Dante had maintained a careful distance, honoring the boundaries of their arrangement. This moment felt like a dangerous crossing. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. Dante's hand dropped, and something like regret crossed his features. "More than I have any right to ask for." Before she could respond, his phone rang again. Dante checked it, and his expression hardened. "I have to take this." He moved away, answering with a curt, "Problem?" Elena gathered the remaining coffee cups, using the mindless task to steady herself. Whatever had just transpired between them, whatever line had almost been crossed, was over. Dante was back to being the cool, controlled crime boss, and she was just the wife he'd acquired to settle a debt. As she turned to leave, she heard Dante's voice shift from English to Italian, his tone sharp with command. Only one phrase stood out clearly: "Non la toccare." Don't touch her. Elena froze, her limited Italian sufficient to recognize those words. Who was Dante warning not to touch? And why did the protective fury in his voice make her heart race? She continued to the kitchen, setting the cups in the sink while her mind whirled with questions. When she returned to the living room, Dante had ended his call and was standing at the window, staring out at the glittering Manhattan skyline with tension evident in every line of his body. "Is everything okay?" she asked, keeping her distance. Dante didn't turn. "Go to bed, Elena. Tomorrow will be an early start." The dismissal stung, but she recognized the futility of pushing him. Whatever door had briefly opened between them had slammed shut again. "Good night, then." As she turned to leave, Dante spoke again, his voice so low she almost missed it. "Lock your door tonight." Fear prickled along her skin. Why? Now he did turn, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Because some lines have been crossed, and I'm not the only dangerous man in New York." Elena retreated to her bedroom, following his instruction to lock the door despite the questions burning within her. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sparkled like fallen stars, beautiful and treacherous. Somewhere in that sea of lights, someone had crossed a line with Dante Salvatore, and somehow, it involved her. She changed into her nightgown and slipped between the silk sheets of her bed, knowing sleep would be elusive. Today had transformed her world in ways she was still struggling to comprehend, from waitress to manager, from convenient wife to something she couldn't yet define. As she drifted on the edge of consciousness, one thought circled in her mind. Dante Salvatore, the man who had bought her life with cold calculation, might care for her after all. And that realization was more terrifying than any threat lurking in the shadows of his world. Elena woke to the sound of hushed voices outside her bedroom door. Dawn had barely broken, casting long shadows across her floor as she slipped from bed and pressed her ear against the cool wood. "Need to move her today," Dante was saying, his tone clipped and urgent. "The mansion on Long Island, full security detail. And if she refuses?" The second voice belonged to Antonio, Dante's most trusted lieutenant and childhood friend. "She won't have a choice." The finality in Dante's voice sent a chill down Elena's spine. "Not after I tell her about Vincenzo." Elena's breath caught. Vincenzo. She hadn't heard that name in years, not since her father had first started gambling beyond his means. Marco Vincenzo was a loan shark with ties to several crime families, a man who collected debts with brutal efficiency. Her father had borrowed from him before turning to the Salvatores in desperation. She pulled away from the door, mind racing. Why would Dante be concerned about Vincenzo now? Her father's debts to him had been settled as part of her marriage arrangement, or so she'd been told. A sharp knock startled her. "Elena," Dante's voice, calm but commanding. "We need to talk. Now." She opened the door to find him immaculate in a charcoal suit despite the early hour, though the shadows beneath his eyes suggested he hadn't slept. Antonio stood a respectful distance behind, his hand resting casually near the concealed weapon Elena knew he always carried. "Get dressed," Dante instructed. "Pack anything essential. We're leaving in 20 minutes. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's happening." Elena crossed her arms, summoning courage she didn't entirely feel. "What does Vincenzo have to do with this?" Dante's jaw tightened. "You were listening. It's my life being discussed." Of course I was listening. A flicker of something approval, perhaps crossed his features before vanishing. "Vincenzo is claiming your father's debt to him was never fully settled. He says there was interest that wasn't calculated." "That's absurd," Elena protested. "Your lawyers handled everything when the arrangement was made." "Yes." Dante's eyes darkened dangerously. "Which means either my lawyers were incompetent, or Vincenzo is manufacturing a reason to come after you." The implication hung heavy between them. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the penthouse's perfect temperature. "Why would he want me? To get to me?" Dante's voice was matter of fact, but she caught the underlying fury. "You're my wife. In our world, that makes you both valuable and vulnerable. But our marriage isn't real," Elena said, then regretted the words when something like pain flashed across Dante's face. "The world doesn't know that." He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "The contract, the separate bedrooms, the boundaries those are between us. To everyone else, you're a Salvatore, my wife, under my protection. And now that protection has made me a target." The realization was bitter. "No," Dante countered. "Your father's recklessness made you a target long before I entered the picture. I just put a bigger target on your back." Elena turned away, needing space to process. Her new position at Salvatore's, the glimpse of something more personal developing between them, all of it swept aside by this new danger. What about my mother? Is she at risk too? Already taken care of. I had her moved to a private facility upstate last night with round-the-clock security. Of course he had. Dante, Salvatore left nothing to chance, especially when it came to assets he controlled. The thought was both reassuring and depressing. 20 minutes, Elena. He reminded her, softer now. Pack light. Anything else you need can be delivered later. When the door closed behind him, Elena sank onto the edge of her bed, hands trembling. In the 3 months of their arrangement, she'd successfully maintained the illusion that she was still in control of her own life. That illusion had just shattered completely. 19 minutes later, Elena emerged with a single suitcase. She dressed practically in jeans, a sweater, and boots clothes she'd purchased herself before the marriage, rather than the designer pieces Dante had provided. A small act of defiance. The penthouse was filled with Dante's men 6 that she could see, all armed, all watching the entrances with professional vigilance. Antonio was on his phone by the window, speaking rapid Italian. Dante stood at the center of the country, in controlled chaos, issuing orders and checking his watch. He looked up when she approached, his eyes taking in her attire with a barely perceptible frown. "Ready? Do I have a choice?" "We always have choices, Elena." His gaze held hers steadily. "Some are just worse than others." In the private elevator, flanked by security, Elena finally asked the question that had been burning since she'd overheard their conversation. "What aren't you telling me about Vincenzo?" Dante's expression remained neutral, but she caught the slight tension in his shoulders. Now isn't the time. If I'm in danger because of him, I deserve to know everything. He studied her for a long moment before responding. Vincenzo didn't just loan your father money. Your father worked for him, laundering money through his accounting firm. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. That's not possible. My father was many things, but he wasn't a criminal? Dante's voice was gentle but unyielding. Everyone has a breaking point, Elena. Your mother's diagnosis, the medical bills, his gambling debts. He crossed lines he never thought he would. The elevator doors opened to the underground garage, where 3 identical black SUVs with tinted windows waited. Elena barely registered being guided to the middle vehicle, her mind reeling from Dante's revelation. Her father, the man who had taught her right from wrong, who had read her bedtime stories and helped with her math homework, had been working for a criminal, had been a criminal himself. And then he'd sold her to another criminal to save himself. The convoy pulled out of the garage, surrounded by motorcycle escorts. Elena stared unseeing at the tinted window, her reflection a pale ghost against the glass. He was desperate. Dante broke the silence, watching her carefully. People make terrible choices when they're desperate. Like I did? Marrying you? The words came out harsher than intended. Yes. His honesty surprised her. Though I'd like to think I've been a better option than Vincenzo would have been. Elena turned to him then. What would have happened if I had refused? If I had walked away from your offer? Dante's expression darkened. Vincenzo would have claimed your father's debt and you as payment. He has. Specific tastes. You wouldn't have survived a year. A chill ran through her at the matter-of-fact assessment. And you? What were your plans for me when you offered this arrangement? To give you what you needed most. His gaze was steady. Safety. Security. Distance. If that's what you wanted. And what did you want? Dante looked away, his profile sharp against the morning light. A wife who wouldn't betray me. Who had too much to lose to ever consider it. A prisoner with golden handcuffs, Elena said bitterly. A partner, he corrected, surprising her. Eventually, when you were ready, before she could respond, Antonio's phone rang. He answered, listened briefly, then turned to Dante with a grim expression. They found Raymond. He's been questioned. Dante cursed softly. How badly? Hospital, not morgue. Elena watched the exchange with growing dread. Raymond was Dante's lawyer, the one who had drawn up their marriage contract and supposedly settled all her father's debts. What does this mean? She asked when Antonio returned to his call. It means Vincenzo is sending a message. Dante's voice was cold. And that we have a leak somewhere in my organization. The implication hung heavy between them. Someone close to Dante had betrayed him. Someone who knew about Elena, about her father's history with Vincenzo, about the legal arrangements of their marriage. The convoy turned onto the Long Island Expressway, leaving the dense urban landscape behind. Elena had never been to Dante's family estate. Their arrangement had kept her mostly in Manhattan, either at the penthouse or at Salvatore's. She knew only that it was the traditional seat of Salvatore power, where Dante had grown up, and where his father had ruled the family business for decades before him. Why take me there? She asked. Why not somewhere Vincenzo wouldn't expect? Because the estate is a fortress, Dante replied. 3 generations of Salvatores have made it impenetrable. It's the safest place for you right now. While you do what? Start a war with Vincenzo? Dante's lips curved in a smile that held no warmth. Wars have already started for less, cara mia. The endearment slipped out naturally, catching them both off guard. Elena looked away first, uncomfortable with how the simple words had made her heart race. An hour later, the convoy passed through imposing wrought iron gates that opened to reveal a sprawling estate. The mansion was a blend of old-world Italian architecture and modern security, with manicured gardens surrounding a stone villa that had to be at least a century old. Welcome to Villa Salvatore, Dante said as the vehicles pulled to a stop in the circular drive. My family has owned this land for 4 generations. Elena stepped out, taking in the imposing facade with its climbing ivy and stone balconies. Despite the circumstances, she couldn't help but be impressed. This wasn't just a home, it was a legacy carved in stone. Signora Salvatore. An elderly woman appeared at the entrance, her smile warm despite the tension evident in the security personnel surrounding them. I am Rosa. I have prepared your rooms. Thank you, Elena replied automatically. following Rosa into a soaring entry hall with marble floors and a sweeping staircase. The interior was surprisingly light and airy, with high ceilings and large windows overlooking the grounds. Family photographs lined one wall, generations of Salvatore's captured in black and white, then color, leading finally to a wedding portrait of Elena and Dante. She paused before it, studying their formal pose. They looked like strangers playing at intimacy, their hands clasped at a careful distance between their bodies. Had anyone looking at this photo ever believed they were in love? My mother insisted on displaying it prominently, Dante said from behind her. She was disappointed she couldn't attend the ceremony. I didn't know your mother was still alive. It was one of many things Elena realized she didn't know about the man she'd married. She lives in Sicily now, returned after my father died. Dante's voice softened when he spoke of her. She's always wanted to meet you. Another Salvatore obligation I've failed to fulfill, Elena said, more wistfully than she'd intended. Dante's hand touched her elbow lightly. She would have liked you. Your strength reminds me of hers. Before Elena could respond to the unexpected compliment, Antonio appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. We need to talk. Now, Dante's demeanor shifted instantly from almost tender husband to commanding capo. Take Elena to her rooms first, he instructed Rosa. Make sure she has everything she needs. Dante, Elena started to protest. I'll find you after, he promised, already turning away. There are some things I need to handle first. Rosa guided Elena up the staircase to the east wing of the villa. This was the master suite, she explained, opening double doors to reveal a stunning bedroom with a 4-poster bed and adjoining sitting room. Signor Salvatore has taken rooms in the west wing to give you privacy. Separate bedrooms, even here. Their marriage contract maintained to the letter. How long have you worked for the Salvatore family, Rosa? Elena asked, noting the woman's obvious comfort and familiarity with the household. Since before Dante was born, Rosa smiled, a touch of mischief in her eyes. I knew him when he was small enough to hide in the kitchen cupboards. The image of a young Dante before he became the ruthless head of a crime family was difficult to reconcile with the man she knew. Was he happy? As a child? Rosa's expression grew, thoughtful. He was serious, even then. His father was not an easy man. But yes, there was happiness too. She busied herself opening curtains. He has never brought a wife here before, not even when he was engaged to Sofia Russo. Elena froze. Dante was engaged before? Rosa looked immediately regretful. Forgive me, I assumed you knew. There's a lot about my husband I don't know, Elena said quietly. It was many years ago, Rosa offered, clearly trying to smooth over her mistake. Before his father died, the arrangement ended. Poorly. An arranged engagement that ended badly. Another piece of the puzzle that was Dante Salvatore, though it created more questions than it answered. After Rosa left, Elena unpacked her small suitcase, the routine task giving her time to process everything that had happened. In less than 24 hours, her life had transformed yet again from waitress to manager to hunted prize in a game between powerful men. She changed into fresh clothes and explored the suite, which was larger than the entire apartment she'd shared with her mother before everything fell apart. The bathroom featured a sunken marble tub with gold fixtures. The sitting room held a collection of first editions behind glass. The bedroom's terrace overlooked formal gardens that stretched toward a shimmering lake in the distance. This was Dante's world, not just the criminal empire, but this legacy of wealth and power that had shaped him from birth. For the first time, Elena began to understand the weight he carried, the responsibilities that had turned a serious child into a dangerous man. She was standing on the terrace, watching the sun begin its descent, when she heard the bedroom door open. Dante appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened and a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. You should come inside, he said. It's not safe to be visible from the grounds. Elena didn't move. Even here? In your fortress? Especially here. He stepped onto the calm terrace, closing the distance between them. This house has survived 3 attempts to storm it in my lifetime alone. I'd rather not make it 4. What did Antonio tell you? She asked. What's happening that you're not telling me? Dante sighed, taking a long drink before answering. Vincenzo has put out a contract. 5 million for you, delivered to him alive. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Elena gripped the stone balustrade to steady herself. Why? Why would he pay that much? Because he knows what you're worth to me. Dante's voice was low, dangerous. And because he knows taking you would destroy not just my reputation, but the alliances I've built over the past decade. I'm a pawn in your power struggle, Elena said flatly. No. Dante set down his glass, stepping closer until she could feel the heat of him, behind her. You're my wife, on paper, in every way that matters in my world. His hands came to rest beside hers on the balustrade, not touching her, but effectively caging her between his arms. And now I need you to be my wife in truth. Elena turned to face him, finding herself trapped between the cold stone and Dante's unyielding presence. What does that mean? It means, he said, his dark eyes intense, that the separate bedrooms, the careful distance, the pretense that our marriage is just a business arrangement, all of it ends today. Vincenzo has spies everywhere. If they sense any weakness in our union, any hint that you're less than fully mine, they'll use it against us. So now I have to pretend to love you too? The bitterness in her voice couldn't mask the tremor beneath it. No. Dante's fingers brushed her cheek, feather-light. But you do need to act like a Salvatore. Strong, united with the family, accepting of the protection I provide without fighting me at every turn. And if I can't do that? Elena challenged, even as she felt herself responding to his proximity in ways she'd fought against for 3 months. Then I can't keep you safe. The admission seemed to cost him. And everything I've done, everything we've both sacrificed, will have been for nothing. The sun cast long shadows across the terrace as they stood locked in this moment of truth. Elena had spent months maintaining emotional distance from the man who had bought her life, telling herself their arrangement was temporary, that her heart wasn't part of the bargain. Now he was asking her to surrender that last defense. What happened to your engagement to Sofia Russo? The question escaped before she could stop it. Dante went very still. Who told you about that? Does it matter? His jaw tightened. It was arranged by our families when I was 25. Political, like most alliances in our world. What happened? She betrayed me. The 3 words held volumes of unspoken pain, fed information to the Russo family that nearly got my father killed. When I discovered her treachery, I ended the engagement. And? Elena pressed, sensing there was more to the story. And nothing. Dante stepped back, creating distance between them. The Russo family retaliated. There was bloodshed on both sides. Eventually, a truce was negotiated. It's ancient history. But it wasn't, Elena realized. The betrayal had shaped him, hardened him. It was why their marriage contract had been so explicit about her loyalty, why he kept her close but emotionally distant. Dante Salvatore had been betrayed by a woman he was expected to trust, and he had never allowed himself to be vulnerable again. Until now, when circumstances were forcing his hand. I need to know you're with me, Elena. Dante's voice was quiet but intent. Not just because of our arrangement, but because you understand what's at stake. Your life. Your mother's safety. The survival of everything I've called to built. In that moment, Elena saw beyond the crime boss, beyond the dangerous man who had purchased her freedom with gold handcuffs. She saw someone fighting for his world the only way he knew how, with power, with strategy, and with a desperate need to protect what was his. And like it or not, she was his. By contract, by name, and increasingly, by something deeper she wasn't ready to name. I'm with you, she said finally. Not because I approve of your world or how we came to be married, but because I know Vincenzo would be worse. Because my mother needs the care you provide. Because, she hesitated, then committed to the truth. Because you've honored every part of our arrangement, even when it would have been easier not to. Relief flashed across Dante's features, quickly masked. Then come inside. We have plans to make. In the suite sitting room, Dante outlined the security measures being implemented, rotating guards, surveillance on all approaches to the estate, secure, communications channels, and trusted staff vetted over generations. You won't leave the grounds without me, he instructed. Even with security, it's too risky. The Tribeca restaurant opening will have to be managed remotely for now. Elena nodded, accepting the necessity even as she chafed at the restrictions. How long will this last? Until Vincenzo is no longer a threat. The implication hung in the air between them. Vincenzo would remain a threat until he was dead, and Dante intended to make that happen. There's something else, Dante said, setting aside his empty glass. Something I need to show you. He led her through the mansion's hushed corridors to a room she hadn't seen before, a wood-paneled study with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive desk that looked like it had served generations of Salvatore patriarchs. Dante unlocked a hidden panel behind one of the bookshelves, revealing a small safe. From it, he withdrew a worn leather folder tied with a faded ribbon. "Your father sent this to me the day after our wedding," he said, placing it on the desk between them. "I've been trying to decide whether to show it to you." Elena stared at the folder, dread pooling in her stomach. "What is it?" "Letters, records." Dante's expression was grim. "Evidence of how deep your father's involvement with Vincenzo went." With trembling fingers, Elena untied the ribbon. Inside were dozens of letters spanning years, contracts bearing her father's signature, and photographs that made her blood run cold. Her father, her gentle, accountant father, standing with known criminals, accepting envelopes of cash, shaking hands with Marco Vincenzo himself. "I don't understand," she whispered, documents slipping from her numb fingers. "This can't be him. Not my father." "It is," Dante said quietly. "He was Vincenzo's financial advisor for over a decade, helped him hide millions from the federal government, launder drug money through legitimate businesses, and evade RICO investigations." Elena sank into a leather chair, her world tilting on its axis. "Then why did Vincenzo turn on him? Why demand money when my father was so valuable?" "Because your father tried to steal from him." Dante's voice was matter of fact. "Nearly $2 million, siphoned from accounts he managed. He almost got away with it, until an audit exposed the discrepancy. That's when he came to you," Elena realized. "When he offered me in exchange for protection." Dante nodded. "He knew Vincenzo would kill him and possibly you and your mother as collateral damage. He thought my organization could shield you all. But instead, you took me and left him to face Vincenzo alone." The bitterness in her voice was palpable. "I protected you and your mother," Dante corrected. "Your father made his choice when he stole from one of the most dangerous men in New York. I couldn't save him from that, wouldn't, even if I could have. Men like him, who put their families at risk, deserve whatever comes to them." Elena looked up, catching something in his tone that went beyond business calculation. "This is personal for you somehow." Dante was silent for a long moment before answering. "My mother suffered because of my father's choices. I watched her pay the price for his ambition, his ruthlessness. I swore I would never be the kind of man who brought that kind of pain home to his family." The admission cracked the facade of the untouchable crime boss, revealing the man beneath a man shaped by childhood wounds, by witnessing his mother's suffering at the hands of a powerful husband. "Yet here I am," Elena said softly, "paying the price for my father's choices. And yours." "Yes," Dante didn't deny it. "The difference is, I'm trying to protect you from the consequences. Your father threw you to the wolves to save himself." The truth of it cut deep. Her father had disappeared immediately after her wedding, leaving not even a note of apology or explanation. He had sacrificed her to save himself, then vanished without a backward glance. "Where is he now?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. "No one knows," Dante replied. "He went underground after the wedding. Even my resources haven't been able to locate him. But Vincenzo is still looking." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Dante's expression darkened. "And he's using you to flush him out. He believes your father will surface if he thinks you're in danger." Elena laughed bitterly. "Then he doesn't know my father at all." "Perhaps not." Dante moved around the desk to stand before her. "But he does know me. Knows that I will burn his entire organization to the ground before I let him touch what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have angered her. Instead, it sent a complicated thrill through her body, the dark allure of being valued so fiercely, even if it was as a possession rather than a person. "And what happens after?" she asked, looking up at him. "When Vincenzo is gone and the danger has passed. What becomes of us then?" Dante's gaze held hers, something unreadable in his dark eyes. "That depends on you, Elena. On what you want once you're truly free to choose." The implication stunned her. "You would release me from our contract? If that's what you want." His voice was carefully neutral. "Eddie, when this is over, when your mother's care is secure and Vincenzo is no longer a threat, you can walk away. I'll provide for you, of course, a new identity, money, whatever you need to start fresh." The offer hung between them: freedom, something she had believed impossible since the day she'd signed the marriage contract. Yet instead of relief, Elena felt an unexpected hollowness at the thought of walking away from Dante, from the life she'd reluctantly begun to build as his wife. Before she could respond, the study door burst open and Antonio appeared, his expression grim. "They found him," he said without preamble. "Elena's father. He's dead." Elena stood frozen, the words hanging in the air like smoke after gunfire. Dead. Her father was dead. She should feel something: grief, shock, anger, but there was only a hollow numbness spreading through her chest. "How?" Dante asked, his voice cutting through the silence. "Execution style. Body dumped in the Hudson." Antonio's eyes flickered briefly to Elena before returning to Dante. "Vincenzo's signature. Left hand severed. Enough." Dante moved to Elena's side, his hand hovering near her elbow without touching. Details later. Elena barely registered their exchange. Her father, the man who had taught her to ride a bicycle, who had cried at her college graduation, who had sold her to the Mafia to save himself, was gone. The complicated tangle of love and betrayal she felt toward him would never be resolved now. "I need to tell my mother," she said mechanically. "Not yet," Dante countered gently. "Not until we know it's not a trap." "A trap," the words penetrated her. Shock. "You think Vincenzo is lying about killing him?" "I think Vincenzo never does anything without multiple motives," Dante replied. "Antonio, verify the identification. DNA, if necessary. And increase security around Mrs. Russo's facility upstate." Antonio nodded and retreated, closing the study door behind him. Elena sank back into the leather chair, the folder of her father's crimes still spread across the desk before her. "He's really gone." It wasn't a question. "Most likely," Dante acknowledged, his tone gentler than she'd ever heard it. "I'm sorry, Elena." She looked up at him, searching his face. "Are you?" "You hated him for what he did to me." "I did," Dante admitted. "I do. But he was still your father, and this will cause you pain. That's not something I want for you." A single tear escaped, trailing down her cheek. Elena brushed it away angrily. "I don't know what I feel. He betrayed me in every way possible. He lied about who he was my entire life. He traded me like a currency when his debts came due." Her voice broke. "But he was still my father." Dante knelt before her, taking her hands in an unprecedented gesture of comfort. "The man you loved and the man who betrayed you both existed. One doesn't erase the other." "How can you, of all people, say that?" she whispered. "After what he did? Because I understand complicated fathers." His thumbs traced circles on her wrists. "Mine was a monster to many, a protector to some, and something in between to me. His death left me with questions that will never be answered. Rage that had nowhere to go." Elena had never heard Dante speak of his father this way, with raw honesty, instead of calculated precision. In this moment, he wasn't the Mafia boss who had purchased her life with cold calculation. He was simply a man who understood her pain, because he had lived it himself. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steadier. "Now we wait for confirmation," Dante replied. "And we prepare. If your father is truly dead, Vincenzo will have lost one leverage point, but his focus on you will only intensify." "Because I'm yours," Elena said, the words no longer carrying the bitter sting they once had. "Because you're mine," Dante confirmed, something possessive and protective flashing in his eyes. "And because Vincenzo won't stop until he's taken everything I value." He rose, still holding her hands. "You should rest. I'll have Rosa bring you something to eat later." Elena nodded, suddenly exhausted. The emotional whiplash of the past 24 hours had drained her completely. As Dante guided her back to her suite, she leaned against him slightly, accepting his support in a way she never had before. At her door, he hesitated. "I'll post guards outside. Try to sleep if you can. Dante." She caught his sleeve as he turned to leave. "Thank you for telling me the truth about my father. I needed to know." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a tension, releasing in his jaw. "Truth is rare in our world, Elena, but you've always deserved it from me." After he left, Elena curled on the massive bed, expecting sleep to elude her. Instead, exhaustion claimed her almost immediately, pulling her into darkness, where her father's face blended with Vincenzo's, where blood stained Hudson waters, where Dante stood like a sentinel between her and a world determined to break her. She woke to darkness and the distant sound of voices. Her room was shadowed, illuminated only by moonlight filtering through the terrace doors. The bedside clock showed 3:17 a.m. She had slept for nearly 12 hours. Elena slipped from the bed, drawn to the voices below. Pulling on a robe, she moved silently through the darkened villa, following the sound to the study where Dante had shown her the evidence of her father's crimes. The door was ajar, a slice of light cutting across the hallway carpet. She paused, not intending to eavesdrop, but the words froze her in place. Confirmed it was him, Antonio was saying. Dental records match. The ME estimates he'd been dead approximately 36 hours before they dumped the body. And the message? Dante's voice was cold, controlled. Exactly as expected. A new voice one Elena didn't recognize. A father for a wife, carved into his chest. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth, suppressing a gasp. Her father had been dead before Vincenzo had even put out the contract on her. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about her, about Dante, about a blood feud that had found a new target. Vincenzo wants a meeting, Antonio continued. Neutral territory. Says he's willing to negotiate. It's a trap. Dante's voice was flat. Undoubtedly, the unknown man agreed. But refusing outright would make you appear weak. Afraid. I'm not afraid of Vincenzo. The ice in Dante's tone could have frozen hell itself. I'm cautious of a man with nothing left to lose. He knows his organization is crumbling. The Commission has already ruled against him in 2 territory disputes. His only play now is to strike at me directly through Elena. Then use her, the man suggested. Draw him out. Make him think he's winning until, no. Dante's response was immediate, vehement. Elena is not bait. She's my wife. A wife you acquired through a business arrangement, the man reminded him. A temporary convenience that has now become a liability. Choose your next words carefully, Congressman, Dante warned, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. You forget yourself. Congressman? Elena's mind reeled. A public official was in Dante's study at 3 a.m., discussing Mafia business as casually as if they were planning a dinner party. Forgive me, the congressman backtracked quickly. I meant no disrespect. I simply suggest that in our world, sacrifices are sometimes necessary for the greater good. Not this sacrifice. Dante's tone left no room for argument. Elena stays protected at all costs. We deal with Vincenzo my way? And what way is that? Antonio asked. We go to the Commission. Dante's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. Vincenzo has violated our laws by targeting a made man's wife without sanction. By executing Elena's father, who was under my protection by proxy, he's declared war not just on me, but on the entire Salvatore family. The Commission moves slowly, the congressman cautioned. Vincenzo could act before they render judgment. Then we accelerate their timeline, Dante replied. I have evidence that Vincenzo has been skimming from the shared operations on the docks, cheating his partners, breaking their confidence. Add that to his unsanctioned move against Elena, and the Commission will have no choice but to act swiftly. Elena had heard enough. She backed away from the door, but her elbow knocked against an antique vase positioned on a narrow hall table. It wobbled precariously, the sound of ceramic against wood suddenly deafening in the silent corridor. The study door wrenched open. Dante stood framed in the doorway, his expression shifting from dangerous to concerned in an instant when he saw her. Elena. He stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. You should be resting. My father was already dead, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Vincenzo killed him before he ever threatened me. Dante's jaw tightened. Yes, we confirmed it this evening. Were you going to tell me? Of course. He guided her away from the study, his hand warm against the small of her back. But not at 3 a.m. when the news would only give you nightmares. Elena allowed him to lead her to a small sitting room she hadn't seen before. A cozy space with a fireplace and comfortable furniture that looked more lived in than the formal rooms of the villa. This was my mother's favorite room, Dante explained, gesturing for her to sit. The only place in the house where my father allowed her to decorate as she pleased. Elena sank onto a velvet sofa, noting the feminine touches that distinguished this space. Hand-embroidered pillows, watercolor landscapes, shelves lined with poetry and novels rather than the leather-bound business texts that filled the study. I heard what the congressman said, she admitted, about using me as bait. Dante's expression darkened. Castellani has always valued expediency over honor. It's why he'll never rise above being a useful tool. But he's right, isn't he? From a strategic perspective, I am a liability. No. Dante sat beside her, closer than he would have dared before today. You are my wife. In my world, that means you're under my protection, not to be sacrificed for convenience. Even when our marriage was just a business arrangement? It's never been just anything, Elena. Dante's voice softened. Not since the moment you walked into that chapel with your head high, ready to honor a bargain your father made at your expense. I respected your courage. Then, I respect it even more now. The simple honesty in his words touched something deep inside her, a place that had been walled off since the day she'd signed the contract, binding her to this dangerous man. I need to know what happens next, she said. The truth, Dante. All of it. He studied her face, as if weighing how much she could handle. Then he nodded. I go to the commission tomorrow, present my case against Vincenzo. If they rule in my favor, and they will, they'll sanction his removal. Removal, Elena repeated. You mean murder. I mean justice, Dante corrected. By the laws that govern our world. And if they don't rule in your favor? His expression hardened. Then I handle Vincenzo myself. Consequences be damned. The casual way he discussed killing a man should have horrified her. Instead, Elena found herself wondering when exactly she had started to understand the brutal logic of Dante's world, when the line between right and wrong had begun to blur in the face of survival. And what about us? She asked, the question that had been building since the moment he'd offered her freedom once the danger passed. When this is over, what becomes of our arrangement? Dante was silent for a long moment, the firelight casting shadows across his face. What do you want it to become, Elena? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider until now. I don't know, she admitted. 3 months ago, I would have said freedom to walk away, to forget I ever knew the name Salvatore. But now? He prompted when she didn't continue. Now I understand more about your world, about you. She met his gaze directly. About why you keep people at a distance. Why you value loyalty above all else. Why you offered me an arrangement instead of simply taking what you wanted. And what did I want? Dante asked, his voice low. A wife who wouldn't betray you. She quoted his earlier words back to him. A partner, eventually, when I was ready. Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to see. Are you ready now, Elena? The question contained multitudes asking not just about partnership but about trust, about crossing the final boundary between them, about transforming their paper marriage into something real. Before she could answer, Dante's phone vibrated. He checked it, his expression darkening instantly. What is it? Elena asked, tension coiling in her stomach. Vincenzo's men have been spotted near the perimeter, he said, already standing. Security is handling it, but I need to be sure. He looked down at her, conflict evident in his face. Stay here. This room has reinforced walls and a panic button under the side table if you need it. I'll send Rosa to stay with you, Dante. Elena caught his hand as he turned to leave. Be careful. He paused, surprised by her concern. Then he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to bare her knuckles, the most intimate gesture he had ever offered her. Always, cara mia. After he left, Elena paced the small room, listening for any sound that might indicate trouble. The villa remained eerily quiet, the thick stone walls muffling whatever might be happening outside. Rosa appeared 10 minutes later, her face creased with worry but her manner calm. It's precautionary, she assured Elena, setting down a tray with tea and small sandwiches. The security system is the best in the country. No one gets through unless Signor Salvatore allows it. Elena tried to take comfort in the older woman's confidence, but anxiety gnawed at her. Vincenzo had already killed her father. He had put a price on her head, and now his men were testing Dante's defenses, perhaps as a distraction, while something worse unfolded elsewhere. Rosa, she said suddenly, my mother, is there any way to check if she's safe? Rosa's expression softened with understanding. I'll call the nurse directly, and she promised, pulling out a mobile phone. The facility has its own security team. While Rosa made the call, Elena moved to the window, peering through a gap in the heavy curtains. The manicured grounds were bathed in moonlight, security floodlights illuminating the perimeter. In the distance, she could see figures moving near the gates. Dante's men, she assumed, patrolling with watchful vigilance. "Your mother is fine," Rosa reported, returning to Elena's side. "The nurse says she's sleeping peacefully. Extra guards were posted this evening as a precaution." Relief washed through Elena. Whatever happened tonight, her mother at least was protected. An hour passed, then 2. Rosa dozed in an armchair, but Elena remained alert, tension keeping her nerves raw. When the door finally opened, she jumped to her feet, expecting Dante. Instead, Antonio entered, his expression grim. "We need to move you," he said without preamble. "Now. Where's Dante?" Fear clutched at her throat. "Handling the situation." Antonio's non-answer sent ice through her veins. "There's been a breach on the east side. We're relocating you to the panic room until it's contained. I'm not going anywhere without knowing Dante is safe," Elena insisted, a newfound strength in her voice. Antonio's expression hardened. "I have my orders, Mrs. Salvatore. With or without your cooperation." Rosa had awakened at their voices. "Antonio," she chided, "you're frightening her." "Tell her the truth." The lieutenant hesitated, then sighed. "Dante went to confront Vincenzo's men personally when they breached the perimeter. We lost communication with him 10 minutes ago." The world tilted beneath Elena's feet. "Lost communication? What does that mean?" "Is he—" "We don't know," Antonio cut her off, "which is why we need to get you secured immediately. It's what Dante would want." The mention of Dante's wishes struck a chord. Whatever was happening, whatever danger he might be in, his primary concern would be her safety. The realization crystallized something inside Elena, a certainty that had been building since the moment Dante had stepped between her and Marcus Romano at the restaurant. "Take me to the panic room," she agreed. "But I want a weapon." Antonio blinked, clearly not expecting this request. "Mrs. Salvatore." "Elena," she corrected. "And I'm serious. I won't be helpless if Vincenzo's men make it inside." After a moment's hesitation, Antonio reached into his jacket and withdrew a small pistol. "Do you know how to use this?" "Point and pull the trigger," Elena replied, taking the weapon with more confidence than she felt. "I'm a quick learner." The panic room was located in the basement of the villa, a reinforced chamber with its own ventilation system, communications equipment, and enough supplies to last for days. Antonio secured her inside, showing her the controls for the security monitors that displayed feeds from throughout the property. "Once I leave, only Dante or I can. Open the door from the outside," he explained. "Stay here until one of us comes for you. No matter what you see on the monitors." "Find him, Antonio," Elena said, her voice steady, despite the fear coursing through her. "Bring him back." After he left, Elena turned to the monitors, scanning each feed for any sign of Dante. The east perimeter showed signs of disturbance, broken landscaping lights, a section of fence damaged but no bodies, no blood. She cycled through camera after camera, searching desperately for the man who had become so much more than a business arrangement to her. An hour passed. The silence of the panic room was broken only by the soft hum of the ventilation system and the occasional beep from the security equipment. Elena's eyes burned from staring at the monitors, but she couldn't look away, couldn't risk missing any sign of Dante's return. The main gate camera suddenly showed movement, a vehicle approaching at high speed. Elena leaned closer, heart pounding, as she recognized Dante's Bentley. The gates opened automatically, and the car screeched to a halt in front of the villa. The driver's door flew open, and Dante emerged, blood staining the left sleeve of his shirt. Elena's breath caught in her throat. He was alive, but injured and alone. Where was Antonio? Where were the other guards? She watched as Dante entered the villa, moving with purpose despite his injury. Camera by camera, she tracked his progress through the house until he disappeared from view in a blind spot near the basement stairs. Minutes later, the panic room door beeped, the lock disengaging. Dante stood in the doorway, his face pale beneath a dark smear of what might have been soot or blood. "Elena," he breathed, relief evident in his voice. She crossed the room in 3 strides and did what she'd never done before. She threw her arms around him, pressing her face against his chest, where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. Alive. He was alive. Dante stiffened in surprise, then his arms came around her, holding her with a tenderness that belied his dangerous nature. "I'm all right," he murmured into her hair. "It's over." Elena pulled back slightly, noting the blood on his shirt with concern. "You're hurt. A graze," he dismissed. "Nothing serious." His eyes focused on the gun she'd set aside when he entered. "Antonio gave you that?" "I insisted," she said. "I wasn't going to be a passive victim if Vincenzo's men broke through." Something like pride flickered in Dante's eyes. "You continue to surprise me, Elena Salvatore. What happened?" she asked, leading him to sit on one of the panic room's utilitarian chairs. The security feed showed fighting at the east perimeter, and then nothing. "Vincenzo came himself," Dante said, his voice hardening. "With 5 of his best men. They disabled 2 of our exterior cameras and cut through the fence where the surveillance had a blind spot. How did you know?" "I didn't," he admitted. "It was luck or fate. I was checking that section of the property when they breached it." Elena's blood went cold at the implication. If Dante hadn't been there at that exact moment, Vincenzo's men might have reached the house, might have reached her before anyone realized they had infiltrated the grounds. "Vincenzo is dead," Dante continued, his tone matter of fact, "as are 3 of his men. The others fled." "You killed him yourself," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." No apology, no justification, just the simple truth. "He gave me no choice. He came here to take you, Elena. To destroy everything I've built, everything I care about." The raw honesty in his voice stripped away the last of her defenses. This dangerous, complicated man had risked his life to protect her not because of a contract or a business arrangement, but because somewhere along the way, she had become truly valuable to him. "What happens now?" she asked, echoing the question she'd posed earlier in his palace, mother's sitting room. "Now we rebuild," Dante said. "The commission will recognize my action as justified self-defense once they learn Vincenzo attacked my home. His organization will be divided among the families. The threat to you will be eliminated. And us," Elena pressed. "What happens to us, Dante?" He looked at her, really looked at her, with an openness she'd never seen before. "That depends on what you want, Elena. I meant what I said when this is over. You can have your freedom if that's what you choose." "And if I choose something else?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. Dante reached for her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Then we renegotiate our arrangement. Not as a business transaction, not as a debt settled, but as 2 people who might have found something unexpected in an improbable situation." "Something like what?" Elena whispered, needing to hear him say it. "Something like respect," he began. "Trust. Partnership." He paused, his dark eyes, holding hers. "Perhaps even love, eventually. If you're willing to try." The word hung between them, love. A possibility neither had dared to consider when they'd signed their original contract. "I thought I hated you," Elena admitted. "When I signed those papers, when I said those vows, I thought I would spend the rest of my life resenting the man who had purchased me like property." Dante's expression remained carefully neutral, though she caught the flicker of pain in his eyes. "But these past months," she continued, "watching you, learning about your world, seeing how you honor your obligations and protect what's yours, it changed something in me, Dante. I don't hate you anymore. I'm not sure I ever really did." "What do you feel now?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion he rarely displayed. Elena considered the question, searching her heart for the truth. "Respect?" she began, mirroring his words. "Gratitude, understanding." She took a breath. "And something else, something I'm not ready to name yet, but something real, something worth exploring." Relief and something deeper transformed Dante's features. "That's more than I dared hope for," he said softly. "More than I deserve. Maybe we both deserve a chance," Elena suggested. "To see what our marriage could be without the shadow of my father's debts hanging over us. Without Vincenzo's threats forcing our hand." Dante lifted her fingers to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm, a gesture of reverence that moved her more than any grand declaration could have. "I would like that very much, cara mia." In the quiet of the panic room, surrounded by monitors showing the secure perimeter of the Salvatore estate, Elena made her choice. She leaned forward and did what she had never done in their 3 months of marriage. She kissed him, softly and without obligation. Dante responded with careful restraint, as if afraid she might shatter or change her mind. When they parted, his eyes searched hers, looking for regret or hesitation. Finding none, he smiled a genuine expression that transformed his usually guarded features. "We should go upstairs," he said. "The villa is secure, and you need rest." As they left the panic room together, Elena noticed something different in how they moved, not as separate entities bound by a contract, but as partners who had chosen each other despite the circumstances that had brought them together. Dawn was breaking as they reached the main floor of the villa, pale light filtering through the windows. The night's violence had left its mark, security personnel moving with heightened vigilance, Antonio directing the cleanup operation outside, Rosa preparing coffee in the kitchen with shaking hands. Yet within the chaos, Elena felt an unexpected calm. Her father was gone, but her mother was safe. Vincenzo's threat had been eliminated, and her marriage, the arrangement that had begun as a business transaction, now held possibilities she had never allowed herself to imagine. "What are you thinking?" Dante asked as they paused at the foot of the grand staircase. Elena looked up at him, this dangerous, complex man who had become her protector, and perhaps something more. "I'm thinking that life takes us in directions we never expect," she said. "3 months ago, I was a prisoner in a gilded cage. Now you're what?" he prompted when she hesitated. "Now I'm a Salvatore," she said, the name no longer feeling foreign on her tongue. "By choice, not just by contract." Dante's expression softened. "The choice makes all the difference, doesn't it?" As they climbed the stairs together, Elena realized that was exactly right. Choice, something she had believed lost to her when she signed the marriage contract, had been restored. Not as she had imagined, not as a return to her old life, but as something new. The freedom to build a life with the man beside her, eyes wide open to both the darkness and the light he carried within. Outside, the sun rose over the Salvatore estate, washing the grounds in golden light that transformed the night's battlefield into something beautiful again. Like her marriage, Elena thought something born of violence and necessity that might, with time and care, become something worth cherishing. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.